Hi, I'm Angela Fehr. Today we're going to take a look at some of my very favorite watercolors and compare colors, talk a little bit about color theory, and I'm going to show you some of the colors that I really love to use, courtesy of my Daniel Smith Angela Fehr palette dot card. These are 18 colors that I chose because I love and use them almost every day, and it was really hard to narrow it down to just 18. We're going to take a look at how I use these colors, why I chose these colors, and of course down below the video I've got links for how you can order your own favorites from this palette. And if you're just getting to know Daniel Smith watercolors, they actually have a full dot card of all their colors that you can purchase and get a feel for those colors before you go out and order them. As you know, I have a giant palette with over 60 colors of paint right beside me that I use on a daily basis here in my studio. I also have on the other side a whole bunch of other colors. I'm always accumulating watercolor paint, and I love color. I'm not going to apologize for it. And so when I talked to Daniel Smith about creating the Angela Fehr palette, a dot card with 18 of my favorite colors, well, it was hard to pick. How do you choose 18 colors when so many are beautiful and have wonderful purpose and effect in my paintings? So I want to show you my dot card to give you the opportunity to know some of my favorite colors, to give a bit of a testimonial regarding Daniel Smith paints, which really are some of my very favorite pigments. Daniel Smith paint has my heart. Tells you a little bit about me. And then on this side we see the colors that I've chosen. And this gives you that opportunity to see how they suit your own painting style before you add them to your palette. And as you can see, I'm not very good at counting because when I went to draw out my swatches, I have these 3 extra spaces. I think what we'll do is I'll show you a couple of these colors mixed in these extra spots. I'm thinking that I want to take these 18 colors and put together a little travel kit for myself so that these are the colors that I bring with me when I paint on plein air. It'll be interesting to see, you know, whether I did a good job of picking the colors or whether I'm missing a few that I will decide to add to my plein air palette later. Each of these little dots is pure pigment. It's been squeezed out on here and allowed to dry. And that gives you the chance to try the actual paint, very similar to how I would use it in my palette. So we're going to just pull out some colors and talk about them. So we're going to start with this carmine. And as you can see, the carmine is a really beautiful, I'm just going to say that about every color. It's really beautiful. It's a really beautiful pinkish red. So I would say it's a cool red. It's got that pinky cast to it. So it's redder than magenta, but as you can see, it has that pink tone as well. What I wanted to do for this very first row of colors was choose, this is phthalo turquoise, kind of a basic primary, so that if you had these 3 colors and nothing else, you'd be able to paint a very wide range of colors. And this is phthalo turquoise. Some might have chosen phthalo blue for this swatch for their middle color in the triad. So you can see it's a very vibrant turquoise. I chose phthalo turquoise simply for the reason that it's the one that I've had the longest and I use the most. I don't actually have phthalo blue to compare. With Daniel Smith making 280 plus colors, you just can't own them all, and it just happens that phthalo blue is in that gap. So it definitely is a little bit of a greener tone, but it does still work for kind of that turquoisey color, and I really love using it to add that pop of vibrant color and to mix greens when I'm mixing Nicolazo with Nicolazo yellow. Nicolazo yellow is as well not exactly a perfect primary color, yet it is one of my very favorite yellows. It's got kind of a coppery tone if you're using it pure or undiluted. You can see it's kind of a little bit coppery down here. One other thing I love about Nicolazo yellow is it's very transparent. but it also has this beautiful push and swoosh across the paper. And so if you're painting with Nicolazo yellow and you drop it into a dark wash of color, if that dark wash hasn't dried yet, you'll actually see that Nicolazo yellow go poof against that dark wash and push some of the dark colors out of the way, and you get this beautiful glowing light coming through. It does mix really well as well with other colors, so you can use it as a primary. The next row of the palette was kind of secondary colors. So we chose an orange, a green, and a violet. And I chose, most of these colors I did choose for kind of emotional reasons. Aussie Red Gold is actually a newer color. It's only been out for a couple of years. And you can see it is an orange. And actually we'll just see if we can't get it to dilute just a little bit. It's beautifully soft and luminous when diluted. Aussie Red Gold is a multi-pigment color. It's actually made using several pigments, so it's not actually recommended as a good mixing color. It tends to get muddy when it's mixed with other colors. But you know, that luminous quality that it creates on its own and actually is really beautiful. And I actually like the chance to make a kind of a murky neutral. And so I'll often mix Aussie Red Gold with a lavender to give me this interesting murky gray. So just because they say multi-pigment colors aren't good mixing colors doesn't mean you can't mix them. Daniel Smith's Green Gold is one of the very few green golds that is really kind of that clear yellow green. And so a lot of the green golds from other brands will compare more with Daniel Smith's Rich Green Gold, which has a bit of a more coppery tone like our Nicolazo yellow. I love green gold. It mixes really beautifully with other colors because it is definitely a lot closer to yellow than maybe a true green. And it's beautiful for any greens in the landscape. I often go to the green gold to start with to build those light-filled greens, and then I choose a darker green to pair it with for the shadow areas. And it mixes beautifully as well to create this huge range of greens and secondary colors, especially with the phthalo turquoise. Cobalt Violet Deep. Now it's a little bit of an interesting color. You can't get a real dark value with Cobalt Violet Deep, but what you do get is this gorgeous granulation. And so I'm going to add a little bit of water to it so you can see the texture of the Cobalt Violet Deep. Just work up a little more pigment. I do feel like I have to work a little harder with Cobalt Violet Deep. It's got a little bit more binder than some of these other colors, a little less saturation of pigment. But what it creates in terms of washes is just so gorgeous. Mixing that with another color gives you a granulating, it makes almost any color granulate, so it's really beautiful. And I love creating texture with Cobalt Violet Deep. So those are my kind of secondary colors in that second row. In the third row, I went to some kind of earthier tones. And so we start with the Mars Yellow. Mars Yellow, I often compare it to yellow ochre or to raw sienna. It's got that buttery color, but like yellow ochre, it's a little more opaque. You get a little bit of good covering power, which is often something I think about in the later stages of my painting. And I really like having an earthy yellow in my palette. Nice and warm, very nice for really diluted. You can get kind of the feeling of sand, or even using it to mix like skin tones gives you that kind of beautiful buttery warm neutral. Venetian Red is just a lot of fun. This is our kind of our second red in the palette. And you know, our first red was the Carmine. It's that beautiful pinky red. With the Venetian Red, we're getting something that's definitely darker, and you can see it's a bit opaque. It's covering over the words, the label that I put on here really well. The interesting thing about Venetian Red, and it's kind of a terracotta color almost, is that it also, I feel like it changes as it dries. It goes on shockingly bright and that strong terracotta color, but diluted, you get this beautiful shade of peach. And then as it dries, the intensity is lost, and it just really blends in really well with the natural tones in your painting. And that's something that I find really appealing. I always am a little bit shocked when I put that first wash of Venetian red on my painting. Oh, it looks so dark. Venetian red paired with Sodalite Genuine, which we'll get to, one of my favorite colors for painting rocks, actually. Okay, this next color is Hematite Burnt Scarlet Genuine. Another one I might have to work up a little bit. It's also got that heavy kind of sedimentary content like the Cobalt Violet Deep. I'm just going to nurse it a little bit to get lots of pigment on my brush before I show you the swatch. There we go. We'll start at the bottom this time. So it looks like a brown, doesn't it? Now we're going to do the same thing with the Hematite Burnt Scarlet. We're going to add some water and pull some color across the page. In fact, I might go back to the Venetian red and just add a little more water. Yeah, I really want you to see that beautiful peachy color that it creates when diluted. I don't want to blot it with my paper towel and kind of flatten out the color, so I am really trying to just add water and lift up a little bit of the pigment gently with my brush. Hematite Burnt Scarlet, the Cobalt Violet Deep is kind of bleeding over into it. I didn't give enough of a border there. The Hematite Burnt Scarlet is a brown. It's got some red undertones and it's got a little bit of kind of almost a black sediment. So we get this multicolored variation as it's starting to dry. And again, that creates beautiful texture that's really a pleasure to work with. And I can see I'm just gonna end up, why am I so messy with my brush? All my swatches are gonna bleed together. This is why I don't swatch. The next row of colors are all cool colors. So I kind of did, you know, my primaries, my secondaries, some earthy colors, really pretty earthy colors. I don't like the boring ones. And then some blues, some cool colors. So we'll start with lavender. Lavender, I think if I could put my colors in order of how frequently I use them, lavender would have had to go first. It is a color I'm currently quite obsessed with. It does have white in it, so it's an opaque color. And it's remarkably versatile. It mixes beautifully. It is beautiful in first layer washes, diluted and allowed to flow. And you can add it at the end of a painting because its opacity, its covering power, lets you put those pops of color into the end of a painting, even over top of a darker wash. So I really love that about lavender. It just seems like it goes, look at how beautiful it looks beside the Mars Yellow. It works with everything on this paper. It's a beautiful pairing with Aussie Red Gold. It has a little bit of texture to it. It just has all these qualities that are some of the reasons I love watercolor. Finally, we have, not finally, continuing on, we have Verditer Blue. And Verditer Blue, again, with the bleeding. Can't stop the bleeding. Okay, we have Verditer Blue here. And Verditer Blue, I feel like, is a nice kind of middle of the road blue. You know, it's kind of a true blue. As you can see, it has a bit of a whoosh to it. And has a nice flow. It also watermarks really beautifully, and that's something I like. Being able to lift shapes for clouds, it works really nice in skies. This is just kind of a really good workhorse blue. I put a little drip of water on the Verditer Blue just to show you how it watermarks. It seems like that would be something we wouldn't want a lot of the time, but what happens is, when you know that your paint does that and you can do it intentionally, you have these marvelous opportunities to create texture and line in your work with very little work on your own part. And that beauty of letting the paint be beautiful on its own adds so much to your painting, especially if you're a loose, intuitive style painter like I am. So another true blue favorite is the Cobalt Teal Blue. This would have been a year ago. This would have been first on the list before the lavender. And over the last little while, lavender's kind of taken the lead. But Cobalt Teal, Actually, I love it for many of the same reasons I love the lavender. It's got a little bit of opacity to it. It's a brilliant, beautiful light value color, and it goes with everything. It really does coordinate beautifully in the painting. It will go, it mixes really well. It mixes beautifully with the pinks. It mixes gorgeous greens if you combine it with yellow. It's just, it makes beautiful grays actually if you're combining it with pink. And so having you know, a color that's versatile, it looks beautiful on its own, mixes well with others. Those are qualities I look for in the paints that I love to use the most. And I love, as we're painting, you can see how much I love the textural colors too. How many of these have that granulating quality. Rose of Ultramarine is no different. And so here we've gone from a row of blues to a row of colors that are a little warmer, a little redder. Rose of Ultramarine is a combination of quinacridone rose and ultramarine blue. And as it dries, and hopefully we can get it to do it, in kind of a stronger intensity. As it dries, the rose and the ultramarine separate so that you get this multi-layered, beautiful quality of color where you can see little hints of the blue and little hints of the pink separate, as well as that beautiful violet that's created by those two colors combining. So we'll let that start to dry, and we'll look at it again in a minute. Now, as you can see, Opera Pink has some neon qualities. I really cannot find a more vibrant, clear pink. Look at that. You will, as soon as I put Opera Pink on my painting, there's always somebody who's going to comment and say, Opera Pink, isn't that a fugitive color? I heard Opera Pink wasn't light fast. We do have the light fastness of the different colors listed here on the paper. Most of these are rated as a 1, so they're the higher light fastness rating. Opera Pink is rated as a 4. And you need to decide how you feel about fugitive colors, colors that don't have that high light fastness rating. I choose Opera Pink until I find a light fast alternative. I'm going to use Opera Pink for what it contributes to my painting now. And I'm going to trust that it can mature with beauty and that my painting will stand up and look beautiful in the future, even if the experience of the colors in the painting change slightly. You need to make up your own mind on this. Quinacridone Sienna, this is probably the closest thing I have to a true orange on this swatch. And you can see it's a beautiful clear earthy orange. It's got a little bit of a muted brown tone to it. And bleeding into the pink, they actually combine really nicely together. And it's a quinacridone color. It's got a little bit of beautiful whoosh. You can see it bleeding up into, chasing that wash down the paper. It's just a lovely color and really easy to use. Look how pretty it is beside the cobalt teal blue. Moving on, the last row of my colors here are my darks, and they're all, additionally, they're all granulating colors. We're going to start with the Sodalite Genuine. Sodalite is another color that goes on darker than it dries. And so we're going to put it down. It looks almost black when you place it on the paper. And again, I'm going to try to work up a good saturation of it. Pull it out. And then we'll watch it change as it starts to dry. We're going to do the same with the Zoisite. Both of these are Primatech colors. And I have 3 Primatech colors in this palette. Hematite Burnt Scarlet is a Primatech as well. The Zoisite Genuine, so the Sodalite I would use almost to replace almost to replace an indigo or a Payne's Gray. It feels to me like a blue-black. And the Zoisite I would use as a gray-green, and it goes down as a strong dark as well. But because it's a Primatech, a mineral color, it has some really beautiful granulation. I always think of Zoisite as a green, but it can be used as one of those dark neutrals as well. And then we have the Moonglow. And Moonglow is similar in the way it kind of presents on the paper. They look like they belong together, but it's not a Primatech color. It's a blended pigment. And so it's got a little bit of a blue undertone to this violet. And I like that earthy violet. I use that quite often. You can see as these colors start to dry, we get that texture again. I'm a texture lover, and so I do tend to go towards colors that create texture. One reason we do this in watercolor is because our paper is flat and pretty smooth, we don't create texture with blobs of paint. We always create the illusion of texture through our brush strokes, through watermarks, and through these granulating colors. And so I love having an assortment of those textural granulating colors to create those beautiful washes. Now, I do have these 3 spaces left over. Let's just show off a couple favorite mixes of color here. Let's start with the opera pink combined with the cobalt teal blue. And you can see I'm getting this gorgeous grayish violet color. So that's a real favorite of mine, something that I use. And always when you're mixing color, how your proportions are going to affect how it looks. Another favorite is the Aussie Red Gold with the lavender. It's looking pretty green right now. Just going to keep cooling it off. I'm actually going to borrow some lavender because I'm almost out on the dot card here. And you can see this is quite a muddy color. Like I said, Aussie Red Gold is one of those muddier colors to mix. So here I've got this muddy gray green with a little opacity to it. And that just creates, and Aussie Red Gold is a strong color too, so it really likes to take over. But a muddy neutral can make your pure colors just look that much brighter. And so I like to have this arsenal of kind of neutrals to work with. Look how that's just changing as it dries. We're seeing all kinds of changes as colors begin to dry. We've seen the sodalite get a little lighter. It's really hard here to actually see the blue undertones in this wash. I'd see it more on a larger quantity of paint. You're really seeing the blue coming out and the rose in the Rose of Ultramarine. Lots of texture here. The Moon Glow, you can see the blue undertones there as well. Beautiful colors. Make me so happy to paint with. And I love working with colors that feel just beautiful on their own. Even if I'm not painting anything at all, if I'm just watching color flow across the paper, these are the colors I'm going to choose. I just can't resist adding a little more lavender to this Aussie Red Gold. So we have this warm and cool neutral that's happening here. With mixing 2 colors to create your neutral, rather than going to a neutral-ish color, you end up with this gorgeous complexity. You can balance the proportions so that it's either warmer or cooler, and that's really enjoyable. Let's do one more. Let's do the Phthalo Turquoise with the Nicolazo Yellow, just to get a look at some of the greens we can create. Because as you can see, there's not a lot of green on this paper, so we make our own. And you can see how Phthalo Turquoise gives us a very brilliant green. It's nice and bright. Were we to mix the Phthalo Turquoise with the Aussie Red Gold, we'll just steal this corner over here. That's actually going to give us a green as well, but it's going to be an earthier green. And so choosing, more of an orange or a reddish yellow is going to give us maybe a more muted green, a more vibrant green with our purer yellows. And I have that option to do both in this lovely palette of 18 hues from Daniel Smith. My Daniel Smith dot card has felt really significant to me because I remember when I first heard about Daniel Smith paints. I was learning to paint. I was in my early 20s, and just reading the description of the colors in the catalog was so exciting. And at the time, I couldn't buy them here in Canada. None of the local stores were carrying them yet. So I remember placing my very first order and just kind of choosing colors based on their beautiful names. And some of those I ended up using a lot, using up, and others really didn't didn't spark anything for me. We choose colors based on our personality and our preferences. So it's been really exciting to get to know Daniel Smith Colors, and then also to get to know the people at Daniel Smith. It's been such a joy to be able to interact with Catherine and Zach and Deborah and the other staff that I communicated with as we were developing this dot card. That was really exciting. Thanks for watching. I know that you're wondering how you can get your hand on one of these dot cards. Well, they're all here in my studio. I have 200 of them. They are going to be going to my workshop students for my workshops in 2020. So I've got a bunch earmarked for that. However, I am giving some away in my Fearless Artist community. Members of that community get access to over 20 of my online courses, as well as live lessons, student critiques, and coaching, and so much more. We'll be kicking off a book clubs very soon. You are welcome to check out and learn all about that community at learn.angelafehr.com.